Good morning. I'm Leslie. I'm alcoholic.
Hey, Leslie.
Before we get started, I'd love to start with the Serenity Prayer because I'm a firm believer that my recovery is all grounded on my foundation with the God of my understanding, and that um, they need to be in this room in order for that recovery story, my recovery story, to be shared and for it to perhaps resonate with somebody, that something within that might be helpful for you. So if you're open to that, I'd like for us to start with the Serenity Prayer. In a moment of silence for those that are still out there sick and suffering. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Thank you. So I am grateful to be here this morning. I have known of Potter House now since late April. I came to learn about Potter House through actually a colleague of mine who I was speaking at a corporate event on leadership in our workplace, and in my talk about my recovery, because for me my recovery is integrated into all parts of my life, and very grateful for it. And so through that story, I had a colleague who shared with me about her son, who is a founder, and I was introduced to the lovely people that are here, Nicole and Donovan and Robert, and had the opportunity to learn more about you and to be able to find ways to serve and to participate with the program and the nonprofit. I have, by the grace of God, been sober since February 19 of 2013, celebrating just a little over 12 years. When I came into recovery, I was just about 40 years old. I had a trial of it a couple of years earlier. I am not a one-chip wonder. I don't know if you know what a one-chip is, but I am not that. I had many trials and errors and a lot of messy paths in order to get to a place of complete and utter surrender. But it takes what it takes, and I learned in recovery that I have to go and have as many explorations of my own will in order to find the grace of God and the gift of sobriety. And so I did, and by the grace of God, one day at a time, I continued to stay sober. And just for me, there's no other way of living. I know what it's like, and I reached a bottom that I needed to reach. And I know that everybody's bottom is different. I had individuals in my early days of recovery who said if I drank like you, I would still be drinking, or would try to tell me that I'm not an alcoholic, and if I listen to other people, places, and things, I may be dead today. And so what I know about sobriety is that it's all a choice, and I make a choice in order to choose to seek recovery versus a liquid in a bottle. I make a choice to not go to a liquor store when I'm having a good day or a bad day. I make a choice to choose to call a friend, to read, to pray, and to do whatever it takes to stay sober, versus choosing those other actions that, for me, never ended up good, whatever the consequences were, whether it was the hangover, the needing the hair of the dog that bit me to get through my next day, letting my body, my mind, and my spirit be used for somebody else's goodwill. I've seen it and experienced it to the depth that I needed to. It may not be what others have, but it was what it took for me. So how did I get here, right? That's what we want to talk about today, is what it was, what happened during, and where we are now. So my story, in my early days, I am very fortunate that I had two loving parents. I don't believe I grew up in an alcoholic home, but there was alcohol in my home. My dad could drink on the golf course, drink at family reunions, have a glass of wine at dinner, but my parents did not, to my understanding, display an alcoholic household. However, it is within my family. It is within, cousins, and there's stories of my grandmother perhaps being a closet alcoholic, which is similar to my story. So regardless of that, I had these, wonderful parents. I have an older brother, typical sibling stuff. I believe on all accounts I grew up in a loving environment, and I needed for nothing. We had our hard times, but we were a family unit. My parents were married 50 years and 4 days when my mom passed from cancer in hospice. I was just about 18 months sober, so I'll share with you about my early days of recovery. But I say all of that to say, on all accounts, didn't see my life ending up where I would sit in a room and say I'm an alcoholic, but it is the greatest gift that I have. And what I do know is that regardless of how good my upbringing felt or may have looked to other people within me, I was not okay. With inside of me, I've always felt less than, not enough, awkward. I mean, I was the girl who could never sit still in class and would sit in the coat closet, which was my discipline as a kindergartner because I couldn't sit still. Today, we would probably have put me on medication, right? But I always wanted to help you. I wanted to be curious. I wanted to walk around. I learned at an early age. Nobody taught me. I knew how to lie very quickly because I wanted to lie so that you would like me. I wanted to tell you what you wanted to hear so that you would be my friend. I would steal, I would cheat, I would do whatever it could in order for whoever it is that I wanted to have as a friend group to be my friend. I was a chameleon to everyone and nobody to myself. So that is just within me, right? As I entered adolescence, I did not pick up alcohol first. I do have other things in my story that are addictive behaviors, from food, shopping, overspending, people pleasing, and codependency. So in my story, my alcoholism did not start until my 30s. Okay, and so I say that because everybody gets to it when they get to it, And I had a doctor who told me when I began recovery, he said, just like you have blonde hair and green eyes, you were wired to be an alcoholic. I'm fortunate that he had a sister who was an alcoholic and very successful attorney. So he knew the disease, right? And he had seen it firsthand and lived it. And so, I didn't know that alcohol would become a problem for me until I picked it up later in life. So in my early days as a preteen, though, I did know that I had addictive behaviors. I started out with eating disorders. And that was my vice, right? Because I didn't feel good enough. I didn't feel in control. And I needed something to fill the void, right? The alcohol's not the problem. It's why I'm using it that's a problem. So before I picked up alcohol, I chose other substances and just was not introduced to alcohol. I think I tried it as a teenager and it did not go well for me. Like I got sick right away and said I would never do it again. In my early teenage years, I ended up finding a path with religion. I had some friends who were very much into youth group and so forth, and I jumped right in. And I'm grateful for that. I had a foundation of God from a very early age by choice. My parents did not force religion on me. And I participated in a Pentecostal church, so Church of God. Average age in the group was probably 50. It was a really tiny country church, and I loved it. I mean, I was there every day of the week. It was just as addictive as alcohol, right? There was no balance in my life, really. But not that that's a bad thing, right? Being in a youth group, running daycares and singing in a choir, reading your Bible, going to Bible college, those were all part of my youth. And but at the same time, I continued to have these really uncomfortable feelings and continue to lie or to cheat or just to do the things, right, that are addictive behaviors. And so as I entered, my early 20s, I jumped into a relationship because I wanted nothing more than to be a wife and a mom and a career woman and all of the things, right? I wanted the white picket fence and the house and all of that great stuff. And so I jumped into a relationship with an individual who was not good for me, right? I wouldn't say, I don't want to go down that path completely, but I will just say that I got into a relationship because I allowed myself to adjust to somebody else's wants and desires and needs. The codependency in me, which I'll talk about also in my story, just raged for a very long time and really got overshadowed from my alcohol use before. I would say I was 10 years into recovery before I really started to look at that. So one of the things I know about recovery is that it is like the peeling back of an onion, if you haven't heard that yet. And so I am grateful because as you start to peel back the onion, you get a little bit. And then you get that piece and you peel back some more and you go to another phase of recovery. So it's always evolving if we allow it to. All right, so in my 20s, I got married, had children, really tried to create this lifestyle of work and family, and just continued in my eating disorders to a point that that became not a vice that worked, and I was introduced at a company event to Corona Light and Lime. and at early 30s, and traveling a lot, trying to hold it all together, and in a relationship that was very unhealthy. And you can only begin to mask who you really are for so long before you start to feel enough pain that you need something to fix the pain. And I'll tell you what, I did not get sick on that Corona Light and Lime, and it became a really nice feeling for a long time. For a good 5 years, I found myself having fun in the beginning. It was social. I could pick it up and put it down. I went through divorce. We lived 8 doors apart. We continued to parent our children. I just could never find my voice. I could never find my footing. I continued to want to allow people to see me as a certain way and show up as a certain way, knowing on the inside I was dying. And the only way that I could make myself feel better on the inside was to use a substance. And eventually the alcohol became that dependency because it created that ease and comfort. And it got to a point in my mid-30s that drinking was no longer fun. So it no longer went from being at the bar. It became a daily morning need, a requirement for me to function throughout the day. I hid alcohol in makeshift flasks, from hairspray bottles to gel bottles. I mean, alcoholics are creative. We are smart. Don't underestimate the power of an alcoholic, right? The world is built and thriving, and a lot of success on individuals who are addicts. And I think that is because we have navigated places and situations that some people can't even fathom. The things that I would try and navigate. I'd go on cruises and would have all of this alcohol in my luggage, and people would have their alcohol taken from them because they actually had it in the bottle inside their bag, and you can't go on cruises with your own alcohol, right? So they're all like getting their wine taken out, and I'm like carrying it on inside of all the things that I needed to, because I couldn't live without it, right? I had to have it. And the disease took me to a place where I no longer wanted it, but I couldn't live with it, and I couldn't live without it. And so, before a morning cup of coffee, by the time, I was probably, a few years into it being such a dependency, I'd have to have alcohol. I did not want to be sick. I did not want to be hungover. I had to show up for the soccer game. I had to show up for the board meeting. I had to, show up for mom and dad's, whatever the events were, because I was the individual who wanted you to believe that I was okay. But on the inside, I was an absolute mess. In my story, I ended up in the ER not once, not twice, but 3 times before I finally surrendered. The first time I went, everyone was, oh, she's just had too much. She's going through a stressful time. She's a single mom. I had lost my job in the real estate crash of 2007. And that was my first time where I really had a hard look at the way I was drinking, because I had gotten to a point where I was drinking every single day. And the doctors were like, if you do this every day, all day, whether it's a small quantity or not, I wasn't there to, pass out or not be coherent. I just needed enough to take the edge off. And, they're like, if you do this, your body becomes dependent. You're going to detox. And so that was the first time I had experienced shakes, vomiting, all of those detox symptoms. And so that, you walk away from that, and I'm like, it'll be all right. I got this. I can do this. I know what life was like before I drank. I just need to fix my life. I need to choose the way I drink. I need to choose where I hang out. I need to make different choices, and I can handle this. Because as, I don't know how you are, but I believed I could control this, right? I believed my will could make myself not want to drink. And so I continued to try, to dabble and drink, and it took me back to the ER, and it just, the in and the out and the up and the down through this like 5-year period. I got divorced. I got remarried. If there's anything that I know is traumatic for my children, it's going through a divorce when they're children, going through a remarriage of parents when they're teenagers, and then going through a divorce again when I finally got sober for real. So my 10-year run or 5-year run, was enough to a place where I just couldn't look at myself in the mirror anymore. There came a day when I was just turning 40, and I had gotten back into this marriage. I was back in this toxic relationship. I couldn't function without having alcohol every single day. I continued to try and do the lies and the cheats and the steals, and then I went back to the hospital in September after a 3-day run at a corporate event where alcohol flowed throughout, and I was probably blacked out for most of the 3 days at the Fontainebleau Hotel in Miami, Florida, and got home and ended up in an ER. I called a friend and said, will you please take me? I need help. And she didn't know I had been drinking that much. And I had a nurse at that ER visit that said, you're the reason why I've been sober 7 years and I continue to go to meetings. So I say that story because, it was clear as I look back that I had finally gotten to a point where I was getting ready to surrender, but it was going to take these little God moments and these people showing up in my life for me to realize, like, I'm not alone. There is, this nurse that's healthy and is making really good choices, and why can't I? People are getting it, and it was, that was in September of 2012, and it still took me till February of 2013 to get sober. So why so long, right? Why did I keep coming in and out? Why? It's like, how many times do you have to detox? I mean, that is not fun. I don't know who's been through it, but that is some bad crap, and you got to take drugs to get through it, and the cold sweats and the nightmares and the restlessness and the shakes alone and the fear of having, tremors. I mean, self-inflicted. Right? The clear fact that all I had to do was stop taking myself to a liquor store and choosing to stop drinking, liquid in a bottle would keep me from having that kind of reaction. But I couldn't do it. And so for 5 months, so this is my recovery cycle. So for 5 months, I went to meetings. I got a sponsor. I participated in recovery meetings at treatment centers. So I was in it, but I wasn't in it to win it yet, right? But I wanted what people had that I saw who had recovery. So I would go to meetings, and I would, go for a few days, and I would be sober, and then I would pick up. And then I'd go to some potluck, and the ladies would say, you smell like alcohol. And I'm like, no, I'm not drinking, because in my mind, I wanted to believe, a little bit's okay. I'm going to moderate this, and it's just crap. And people know, and I used to tell myself other people were drinking, and they weren't. They were stone cold sober. It was me who was showing up to the potluck drunk. It was me showing up to meetings intoxicated, because one is too many, and 11 is never enough. And so I did this dance for several months, and I had women who would show up and tell me the truth, and I'd get sober for a few more days. And so what changed? How did I end up, putting the bottle down for good? I had the opportunity to work with a couple other people who were in recovery, and we were taking a meeting to Acts I'm from the Florida area. I don't think I mentioned that, but my family is down in the Clearwater, Florida area. That's where I got sober. And so there were 2 other individuals that I knew through the meetings, young couple. They were doing meetings at a treatment center. And so I had signed up to volunteer to do this. And I had gone a couple of weeks and had been sober when I went. Well, it was a 3rd week we were going, and that day I had gone to a meeting in the morning. I had listened to a speaker CD. That seems so long ago because we don't do CDs today. Listened to a speaker CD. I was doing all the right things to stay sober that day. And I still drove to the liquor store, and I got myself a small pint and an orange juice, and this is how I drank. I would take the orange juice, I'd pour half of it out. I'd take the vodka, I'd pour half in. I'd throw half a bottle of a pint away. Like, that is crazy talk. Like who does that? But I did, because that was my thing. I was like, I'm just going to have enough to take the edge off. And how I had an edge, and all I was doing was going to work and had just done all of these wonderful things. So anyway, so I drank that. It was like 11 in the morning, and I went to work, and I said to myself, I won't tell anybody, and I'm still going to go to that meeting that night because I made a commitment and I should go. And so what I didn't know is that the only requirement for that meeting is that you could not drink that day. I did not find that out until like let's say a month later. But this is why I know that night I had to be there, because I went to that meeting that night with the expectation that I was supposed to lead it with 2 other people. It was a big book study. We let the group tell part of their story in this treatment center. There was a pilot in that group who told his story about how he was 11 months sober and he drank over a fight with his girlfriend. And I remember listening to him tell his story, and I thought, I'm going to be him in this room, sleeping in this environment, detoxing again if I do not stop drinking. And the next morning I never drank again. And so what I know is that it is all the steps that I needed to have over that 5-month period that helped me to finally get to a place of complete and utter surrender, where God did for me what I couldn't do for myself. And had I not gone that night and showed up, I might not have made it, you know. And I say that because I don't know your story in this room. Some of us have shared a little bit. But everybody has their path forward. And we have choices to make, right, about how we're going to do this recovery journey. One of the greatest gifts of my recovery is not just my own, but as I mentioned, my children were teenagers when I got sober. They were 12 and 15. They will tell you that they did not see their mom actively drunk or intoxicated or oftentimes even having alcohol around them. But they grew up in an environment where I was very much sick and suffering, and that impacts the family as a whole. My recovery has not only saved my life, but it has translated into how it's affecting my family and my children. My daughter allows me to tell her story, in which today she's 18 months sober. When she was 23, she called me in a blackout on the verge of perhaps committing suicide. And I scooped her up, and on the second day took her into a meeting, and she immediately got a sponsor, and she has jumped in, and she's a one-chip wonder. That is only 18 months. She may not. Doesn't matter. The seed's been planted, and the opportunity for her to have recovery in whatever that looks like for herself is only a gift that has been given because God brought me to a place of recovery, and recovery brought me to God and allowed me a day at a time to stay sober. And if nothing more than to help change the trajectory of my family and my children and their families. Because that's what recovery does. Recovery gives us a way of living that is beyond our wildest dreams. So what does life look like for me today? Life today is free because I integrate the 12 steps into everything that I do. When I'm having a bad day and I feel disturbed, the problem's in me. So what step am I working on? I learned that by being in the rooms and about working with the sponsor and reading the big book and going to meetings where we recite the 12 steps every day. So I can sit back and I can go, I need to make an inventory of myself. If I'm disturbed at somebody else, my sponsor taught me what you see in somebody else is a mirror image of yourself. That's an ouch, right? I'm going, I don't like they do this. And they're like, well, then you don't like that you do it. So you got to put the fingers on yourself and you got to do the inventory in order to help change that piece about you. Recovery is a continual practice of change and growth and understanding. As I mentioned, I got sober 12 years ago. Eating disorders, working, shopping, all of that. I wanted wellness for all of it, and it's not perfect. There are days where I, mess up, or that I get angry, or that I want to, turn to another person to make me feel better. I want somebody else to validate my choices, right, without using some of the steps of recovery to help me work through something. It's progress. It's not perfection, right? The one thing that I know I 100% have to do above anything else in this life is stay sober. I have to not put alcohol, a poison in my body. As long as I don't put a poison in my body, everything is possible. Anything is possible, right? When I choose, if I choose alcohol, all bets are off. Okay, so the number one thing I have to do is that. From there, life is like a roller coaster. Life is ebbs and flows. It is progress, not perfection. I shared in my recovery, I got sober 12 years ago. 7 years later, I jumped into a relationship with an alcoholic. Right? I believed that my sobriety was strong enough. I believed my recovery was strong enough. I believed that what they chose to do and how they wanted to drink and perhaps drug would not affect me. I was detaching with love, right? That is ego all day long. Ego all day long. And that's what that is, I just share that because recovery today continues to grow, right? And I jumped into that relationship. Somebody showed up and made me believe that I was everything, to them, and I needed their validation, and that was the piece of me that had not recovered. I'd put down the drink. I had learned how to eat well. I had learned how to get out of debt and manage finances, but I could not get hold of this relationship thing. And I jumped in, and what happened is that it very quickly showed up that I wasn't going to drink, but I was in a very bad situation that was impacting my choices, was impacting because this is a spiritual condition, right? This is about changing all things about us. This is, your attitudes, your actions, your beliefs. And so I became to have behaviors that I was really unhappy with, and had to, look at the circumstances that I was in and the unfolding of when I started to show up, because I started Al-Anon about 12 months ago. So my recovery story led me from AA into Al-Anon, and I needed that. I needed to learn how to work with other people, places, and things. I needed it for my family. I needed it for this relationship that I was in. I needed to learn how to really detach with love. I needed to find a voice and stop still letting other people create my value and my self-worth. And as a friend pointed out to me, you really put a place where you could have impacted your recovery. I really could have, because there's no reason why at some point I might not have woken up one day and said, why don't I just join the party? And that would have been it. So with all said, look, recovery is a process and it's a journey. It's not for everyone who needs it. It's for anyone who wants it. It's for those of us who are willing to show up every day and to choose life over death, to choose health and wellness over destruction. It's to not give in to the impulse and the desires of what that quick fix will do. That ease and comfort can come from the joy in the room, connection with other people, reading, praying, getting connected to whatever the sources are that you need your higher power to be. And it is 100% a willingness to choose sobriety over anything else. My first 90 days in recovery, my mom was diagnosed with cancer. At 9 months sober, I got divorced. At 18 months, my mom lost her life to cancer. And through that entire cycle, I never picked up alcohol. I didn't need a reason to drink. Good or bad, I would have drank. But what I know is that that's the evidence I needed for God to have in my life to say, if you can survive all of that and not drink, you can get through a continual one day at a time in sobriety. Every day sober is better than any day I ever had drinking, even my worst day. And stuff happens, guys, right? I'm still living divorce. I have a son who is still actively in alcoholism, right? And has consequences. And I love him to the end of the earth. And I know that there could be a day where he doesn't make it, but I can't fix that. What I can do is continue to stay sober and be a light in his darkness. And for anyone that I come in contact with. So, look, I just thank you for letting me share today, and I hope that something of that resonated for you. So that's all I've got. Thank you.